following is a selected video from masterthecontent.com, where you will find an extensive video library of lectures for a variety of standardized admission tests. We offer over 600 hours of detailed video lectures for a multitude of standardized tests. Use our interactive in-lecture table of contents to find specific topics of interest. Work through numerous in-lecture examples to help you internalize concepts. To learn more, visit masterthecontent.com. Your career, our passion.
Okay, so what we have on the slide right here is an example of incomplete dominance, and it's an example involving the Snapdragon plant. So when we cross a red Snapdragon plant with a white Snapdragon plant, all the F1 hybrids, all the offspring of that cross will have pink flowers. Okay, so when we cross a red Snapdragon plant with a white Snapdragon plant, all the F1 offspring are seen having pink flowers. So this is a cross between what is the dominant red homozygous genotype and the recessive white genotype, resulting in the formation of heterozygotes, an F1 generation that is all pink. Now, this third intermediate phenotype, this pink phenotype, results or is because of the fact that these offspring, or these F1 offspring, this first filial generation has less red pigmentation, less red pigment than does, for instance, the red parent, or that completely red parental generation. Now, this is much unlike what we've seen, for instance, in the case of Mendel's pea plant. For instance, when we were talking about the character for flower color, denoted by the capital P for purple color and the small p for white color, when we were dealing with heterozygotes, individuals that had the dominant and the recessive allele, all these plants were still purple, which indicated that this genotype was still producing enough gene product for those plants to be completely purple. So that allele was completely dominant over the recessive allele, which resulted in the purple phenotype. That's not the case here. We're actually seeing a phenotype that's actually an intermediary, or sort of like a blend of the two parental phenotypes. So what happens when we then proceed to self or crossbreed the F1 generation? What happens when we self the F1 generation? We get a very weird ratio here. So we're crossing what are the pink, the heterozygotes. So these are the gametes we'd get. A dominant gamete for red color, an allele, a recessive allele for white color. Similarly, we have a dominant allele for red color there, and a recessive allele for white color. So crossing those alleles in that Punnett grid produces a phenotypic ratio of 1 to 1, in that we have one red plant right here, we have two pink plants right there, and we have one white plant right there. Now, because of the simple fact that these heterozygotes have a separate phenotype because of incomplete dominance, right? They have a separate phenotype, the pink phenotype. The genotypic and the phenotypic ratios are the same. So the phenotypic ratio in this case is 1 to 1, and the genotypic ratio is also 1 to 1, because you have one homozygous dominant, you have two heterozygotes, and then you have one homozygous recessive. So the genotypic and the phenotypic ratios are the same. So this is an example of what we call incomplete dominance. Now, the segregation, now the plants we have here, these heterozygotes, are pink in color. Okay, both of them are pink in color before we cross them to obtain this second filial generation, that F2 generation. Now, the segregation of the red and the white flower alleles in the gametes that are produced by those heterozygotes confirms the simple fact that these alleles for flower color are actually heritable factors. So they're actually heritable, and they maintain their identity even when they're in hybrids. So what I mean by that is, in this F1 generation, we saw both the red and the white phenotypes disappear. So we had a pink phenotype that was a blend or a mix of the two previous parental phenotypes. Now, selfing or crossing that F1 generation produces an F2 generation in which we have the white and the red phenotype reappearing. That tells you that these individual alleles, they're discrete, they're heritable factors, and they maintain their individual identity even in hybrid form, because what happens when we segregate them and you have instances in which they're in their homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive form, we see the re-emergence of those phenotypes that had previously disappeared in the F1 generation. So that's what I mean by that. So this is a very good example of incomplete dominance, the snapdragon flower. There's several others out there you can go and look up if you're really interested in learning or knowing more about this phenomenon. Now,